By the time the convoy of black SUVs pulled up, the man who had tried to extort me was already on video smashing my car with a metal bat, screaming about $3 million he thought I owed him. 2 hours later he was in the back of a police cruiser. By the end of the week, his consulting contracts were frozen, his luxury lifestyle was under audit, and the untouchable wife he kept bragging about was facing a board investigation. All because he decided to brake check the wrong car. This is how it started. I was on my way to the airport, running late but calm, when a black Porsche came flying up behind me. He flashed his lights. I was already in the right lane doing the speed limit. He swerved left, cut in front of me and slammed on the brakes. I barely avoided hitting him. I slowed down. I figured he'd move on. He didn't. He did it again. And again. 5 brake checks in less than 100 yards. At that point, I turned on my dash cam audio and called the police. I read off his plate number while keeping my distance. Then he slammed on the brakes one more time, harder than before. This time I couldn't avoid it. The impact wasn't catastrophic, but it was loud enough to draw attention. My front bumper hit his rear. He jumped out like he'd been waiting for it. Designer sunglasses. Expensive watch. Cigarette still in his mouth. He walked straight to my door and kicked it. "Do you even know what you hit?" he shouted. "That's a Porsche." I rolled the window down halfway. I didn't step out. He leaned in. $3 million, he said, holding up 3 fingers. "Wire it today. We forget this happened. $3 million. For a minor collision he caused." A small crowd started forming. Phones came out. People love drama in the middle of downtown. He looked at my car and laughed. "Volkswagen?" he sneered. "You hit a Porsche with that?" I kept my voice even. "You cut me off. It's on camera." He smirked. "You really want to go there? My wife runs Apex Corporation. You don't want that problem." That caught my attention. My wife's name was Elena. She was the chief operating officer of Apex Corporation, and this man was using her name. The police arrived within minutes. I handed over the dash cam footage. Clear lane change. Clear brake checking. Clear intent. The officer watched the clip twice, then turned to him. "Sir, you're at fault." For the first time, the confidence cracked. He stepped aside and made a call. I recognized the number pattern immediately. He was calling Elena. He came back smiling. "We'll settle privately," he said. "Insurance doesn't need to know." "I prefer documentation," I replied. His jaw tightened. The officer issued him a citation for reckless driving. That should have been the end of it. It wasn't. He walked back to his Porsche, opened the trunk and pulled out a metal bat. At first I thought he was bluffing. He wasn't. He walked over and smashed my headlights. Then the hood. Then the windshield. Each strike deliberate. People gasped. Someone shouted for him to stop. Someone else kept filming. He finished, breathing hard, then turned to me. "Now it's worth $3 million, he said. I didn't react. I just recorded. Because in that moment I realized something important. He wasn't powerful. He was reckless. And reckless men leave evidence. By the time his insurance adjuster arrived, the scene had already gone viral locally. The adjuster reviewed the police report, then watched the videos people were showing him on their phones. He didn't even look at me. He looked at the Porsche driver. "Intentional damage voids your coverage," he said calmly. "This is not insurable." The confidence drained from his face. He turned back to me. $50,000, he said quickly. "Cash. Right now." "That won't cover one headlight," I replied. He laughed. "It's a Volkswagen." That's when the dealership appraiser, who had been called because of my license plate series, stepped forward. "This vehicle," he said, tapping the damaged hood, "is a limited production prototype. Registered valuation is just under $9 million. The crowd went silent. The Porsche driver blinked. "It's a Volkswagen." "Yes," the appraiser said evenly. "A custom-built performance prototype. One of 12. I handed over the registration. My name was on it. The Porsche driver stared at the document like it was fake. "You're lying," he muttered. Then I handed him the second registration. The Porsche. Also registered under my holding company. His face changed. "My wife bought this for me," he said slowly. "This is my car." "No," I said. "It's leased through Apex's executive asset structure. Under my holding company." That was the moment he realized something. He had been driving a car he didn't legally own, and he had just destroyed one that was legally mine. He pulled out a black credit card and waved it in front of me. "I can cover it," he snapped. "I've got $1 million limit." I looked at the card. Supplementary. I stepped aside and made a phone call. Freeze all supplementary cards, I said to the bank representative. Effective immediately. Confirmed. He tried to process a transfer on his phone. Declined. He tried again. Declined. The crowd started murmuring. His phone rang. He stepped away to answer. He wasn't smiling when he came back. You're playing games? He said quietly. No, I said. You are. That's when the convoy arrived. 3 black SUVs. Security stepped out first. Then Elena. Calm. Impeccable. Controlled. She looked at the damaged cars. Then at him. Then at me. What happened? She asked. He started talking fast. Claimed I rear-ended him aggressively. Claimed I escalated. Claimed I was threatening him. I handed her the police report. Then the dashcam footage. Then the registrations. She watched without expression. The officer spoke. Ma'am, your associate has been cited for reckless driving and malicious property damage. Associate. Not husband. Not owner. Associate. Elena turned to him. Why were you driving this vehicle? She asked. He hesitated. It was reassigned, he said. You approved it. She didn't respond. She turned to me. You froze the card. Yes. That wasn't your decision. It was my account. Silence. In that moment, this stopped being about cars. This was about structure. For the last year, I had noticed certain consulting fees moving through Apex. Large ones. Always approved under Elena's discretion. Always tied to one name. I had chosen not to escalate internally. Until now. I looked at her and said quietly, we need to talk about asset exposure. She understood immediately. Not emotionally. Legally. If he had injured someone while driving a vehicle registered under my holding structure, liability would have hit me first. Not Apex. Not her. Me. The police placed him in the back of a cruiser pending formal processing. He shouted that this wasn't over. I believed him. But not for the reason he thought. Because the real problem wasn't the crash. It was the paper trail. 3 days after the crash, his access badge to Apex stopped working. By the end of the week, his consulting contracts were suspended pending review. And 2 weeks later, the board voted to initiate a formal compliance investigation into executive asset allocations. The man who thought he could bully me on the highway was now answering questions under oath. To understand why, you need to see what I did next. The night of the crash, after I returned from the airport, I didn't argue with Elena. I didn't accuse her. I didn't threaten divorce. I opened a spreadsheet. Every consulting payment tied to his firm. Every vehicle reassignment. Every discretionary approval. Over 18 months, his advisory contracts had totaled just over $80 million. The vehicles he used? Registered under layered holding entities connected to me. If something catastrophic had happened on that highway, my personal exposure would have been immediate. Not theoretical. Immediate. The next morning, I submitted a formal request for an internal risk review to the independent directors of Apex. Not to Elena. Not to the CEO. To the independent committee. I didn't mention the crash in the initial memo. I mentioned asset liability concentration. Vehicle reassignment without secondary oversight. Consulting disbursements exceeding threshold limits. Within 48 hours, the board's external counsel was involved. Elena confronted me that evening. You escalated this, she said evenly. I formalized it, I replied. You could have handled it privately. I tried, I said. He tried to extort me. She didn't deny that. What she did say was telling. He pushes boundaries. That's how he negotiates. He smashed a car with a bat in public. Silence. The board requested documentation trails for his consulting approvals. Several supporting memos were missing. 2 approval chains lacked secondary signatures required under updated policy. 1 offshore advisory account linked to his firm showed indirect beneficiary overlap with a trust associated with Elena. Not illegal, but undisclosed. That was the turning point. The investigation shifted from optics to governance. His legal team attempted to frame the crash as a misunderstanding. They argued emotional distress. They offered to reimburse repair costs quietly. The board declined. The police charge for malicious property damage moved forward independently. He accepted a plea agreement for reckless endangerment and destruction of property. No jail time. But permanent record. Apex terminated his contracts. Publicly, they described it as strategic restructuring of advisory relationships. Internally, it was damage control. Elena was placed on temporary leave during the review. She wasn't charged with anything. But the trust overlap and approval irregularities were enough to trigger a shareholder review. She resigned before the final report was published. Not forced. But not entirely voluntary either. We didn't scream. We didn't stage a dramatic exit. We had a quiet conversation in our living room. You chose procedure over us, she said. I chose structure over chaos, I replied. She understood that. She just didn't like it. The $9 million prototype was declared a total loss. Insurance pursued recovery directly from him due to intentional destruction. Civil litigation covered the rest. The Porsche was reclaimed by the holding company. I sold it. I didn't want the reminder. 6 months later, Apex released new governance protocols. Dual signature requirements on all discretionary consulting approvals. Vehicle allocations separated from personal holding structures. Independent compliance audits scheduled quarterly. None of that would have happened if I had just wired him money on the side of the road. Power doesn't collapse because someone yells louder. It collapses because someone documents. He thought name-dropping my wife made him untouchable. He thought aggression created leverage. What it created was evidence. I never raised my voice. I never threatened him. I let him swing the bat. And then I handed the footage to the people who sign real checks. Some conflicts are won by force. The important ones are won by restraint. If you want this story to land the way it should, use a calm, controlled male voice for narration. The power in this story isn't in shouting. It's in precision.